Cross of Iron is an incredibly unique World War II movie from 1977. It made itself stand out as a key contributor in Hollywood's shift away from US-centric, hyper-sensationalized glamour of the post-war decades by portraying a German perspective on the Eastern Front in as brutally and authentically a fashion as possible. No historical film is without inaccuracies, however, so for the sake of education, we shall jump straight into correcting the full extent of them all. The film opens with a prologue section consisting of World War II historical footage accompanied by title screens, one of which gives us the setting of the Taman Peninsula in Russia during the German 17th Army's retreat from the Kaban bridgehead in late 1943. We are then shown a German regimental headquarters getting blasted by Soviet 82 BM-41 mortars that are positioned way too close to each other. Their bipods would almost be intertwined here. In reality, mortars would have significant intervals between their positions so the crew could work it efficiently and one strike wouldn't knock out multiple mortars at once. Ideally, they would be in separate mortar pits. Something we will evidently notice throughout the movie is the distractingly high amount of 1970s style haircuts on the characters. From mop tops to sideburns, it's all here. Almost no one has the cleaner undercut type haircuts with short buzz sides and longer hair on top that fashion and doctrine of World War II saw typical to soldiers. In addition, much of the facial hair seen on the characters are completely out of regulation. Even in the combat zone, such large beards and mustaches would not be allowed go unshaven. Hauptmann Kiesel wears formal dress épaulette on his uniform. These were strictly regulated for ceremonial use, not for wearing at the front. The hair officers have brown leather belts and holsters, which will be very uncommonly seen at the front lines by this stage. It had become mandatory since 1939 for their leather equipment to be manufactured in or dyed black. We are introduced to the protagonist, Rolf Steiner, and his men raiding the Soviet mortar position while on a reconnaissance mission. Steiner has the close combat clasp in gold. This was a very prestigious commendation, with only 631 being made throughout World War II. Although established in November 1942, the whopping 50 days of close combat actions it required meant the first awards of the gold close combat clasp took place on August 27, 1944. He and many of the other Germans are wearing soft covers or no headgear at all when they should generally be wearing helmets in combat. Unteroffizier Kruger has a knit cap with a hammer and sickle badge. The Soviet Union did not produce such headgear. If the filmmakers wanted to show Kruger with a captured cap, then they should have just given him a standard pilotka. The Wehrmacht soldiers throughout the movie all have reproductions of early war uniforms with the pleated breast pockets. Most of them even have the bottle green color of the M36. Although such uniforms would still be worn by older veterans, at this stage we should be seeing higher amounts of newer uniforms like the M42 and M43. The shoulder strap Waffenfarbe, collar Lietzen, and cap Schutztasche are in the regular white infantry shade or the dark green color of light and mountain infantry. This is contradicted by the characters being portrayed to be in a reconnaissance unit, however.
You forgot we're a reconnaissance platoon.
If that is the case, then they should have the golden yellow branch color of the cavalry reconnaissance. All Germans in the movie wear black leather jackboots instead of the more common low boots and gaiters. Much of the other gear on the Germans are inauthentic reproductions. A few of the Stahlhelms have a shiny texture instead of the matte textured paint jobs they would have at this stage in reality. Some of the camouflage articles also look off. This Wendejacke, for instance, has a pattern that doesn't match with any used by the Germans for these jackets during the war. This film was primarily shot in Yugoslavia, with the Yugoslav People's Army providing much of the equipment and extras. This is predominantly seen in the poor recreation of the Soviet Red Army forces. They have Cold War era Bulgarian M51-72 helmets instead of the correct SSH helmets. They wear very badly imitated M1943 uniforms. They feature incorrect buttons and stitching, as well as blank fabric shoulder straps instead of the iconic shoulder boards that indicate the rank and branch of the soldier. Yugoslavian belts and suspenders first issued in the 1950s are seen on them instead of authentic Soviet ones. We also see them wearing post-war Yugoslav rifle ammo pouches like for the Zastava M48. We can tell that their footwear is inaccurate from the presence of hobnails on the soles like you would see on German jackboots. The standard Soviet Kurtza boots did not have these. The Mosin-Nagant M44 carbine appears as the main rifle of the Soviets, despite not being officially adopted until 1944. Although some 50,000 trial units were produced in 1943, their deployment at the Kuban bridgehead is not documented. We should instead be seeing the standard Mosin-Nagant M1891-30 and some SVT-40 rifles too. This is another one of those movies that has the Germans speak English with their actors' original accents for Western audiences to have an easier viewing experience. The Soviets, on the other hand, do actually speak Russian, but due to them being played by Yugoslavians, they do so with noticeable Serbo-Croatian accents. Like most World War II films, the firearms use blanks, but this movie does a particularly poor job of trying to hide that. Several shots give clear views of blank adapters in the barrels of the weapons, and slow motion sequences make the blanks ejecting from the guns obvious. In one scene, a spent blank round is plainly visible in the color of Hauptmann Stransky. Low-quality replicas of the Model 24 steel hand granata appear as the only grenade throughout the entire movie. Other common German grenades like the Model 39 I-hand granata never appear. We also do not see any Soviet grenades such as the RGB-33, F1 and RG-42. We now view the inaccurate vehicles used by the Germans in the movie. They consist of the TAM 4500, a Yugoslav truck from 1957. Along with the FAP 1314, another Yugoslav truck of 1962. German trucks like the Opel Blitz would be more suitable. In addition to these, we see an out-of-place US M3 half-track instead of proper German ones like the SDKZ 251. To make them look more German, the filmmakers mocked up the vehicles by adding Balkenkreuze and Wehrmacht license plates. They lack proper tactical markings though, and the plain field grey paint scheme they gave most of them is from earlier in the war. By late 1943, they should primarily be painted in dark yellow with mixes of greens and browns in different patterns such as dot line or ambush types. Almost all of the salutes in this movie are done in the typical Hollywood style with quick up and down actions and going unreturned. The enlisted man or lesser grade officer is supposed to hold his salute until returned. Everyone learns that in basic training.
What do you think of our new captain?
I feel he thinks he's on some kind of special mission. That is to achieve spiritual domination of his battalion.
A captain or Hauptmann would be in charge of a company. It would be a higher ranked officer, typically an Oberstleutnant or lieutenant colonel, that would lead a battalion. Mocked up German anti-aircraft guns are seen getting bombarded. Their design overall looks like a strange merge between the 4-barrel Flak Vierling 38 and single-barrel Flak 38 with an oversized shield.
Where's my bunker?
Down there, in front of the factory, sir.
It is never specified exactly what this area the Germans defend throughout most of the movie is supposed to be. We cannot make any assumptions based on unit history as we are not told what division, regiment, battalion or company any of the characters are of. Looking at the landscape doesn't help in trying to identify it either. The place is shown to be quite heavily defended with Czech hedgehog and dragon teeth obstacles. It also contains a large factory which is entirely camouflaged. Upon further research, we discovered this building to be a remote one near the village of Obrov in Slovenia. Judging from its current state, the camouflage was only added for the shooting of this film, which makes little sense. The facility is shown to be abandoned and of no real strategic importance, so why would they spend such vast resources and time in camouflaging the entire thing and heavily defending it? It is also worth pointing out how dry and dusty the region is shown to be throughout. In reality, the final phases of the German retreat from the Taman Peninsula was defined by persistent rain. This combined with the peninsula's marshy geography created a nearly constant state of mud that bogged down movement, yet barely any of it is seen in the movie.
The 2nd platoon is guarding your post.
Where are they?
They're just returning from reconnaissance, sir.
Who's in charge of it?
Corporal Steiner, sir.
This movie seems to base the ranks on British ones, meaning that Steiner is equivalent to an Unteroffizier, which is the lowest NCO position. As an Unteroffizier, Steiner would be in charge of a squad, not a platoon. A platoon would generally be led by a lieutenant. Even if the officer was killed, then command would be passed to a senior NCO, not a junior NCO.
How long have you been soldiering?
6 weeks, sir.
This would be too short an amount of time in the army to end up at the front line. In 1943, a Wehrmacht soldier typically underwent approximately 13 to 16 weeks of initial basic training before being deployed to a combat unit.
Colonel Brandt and I have agreed to recommend you for promotion to Senior Sergeant.
Senior Sergeant was not a rank in British terminology, let alone German. They are most likely misreferring to a Staff Sergeant, which would be equivalent to a Feldwebel in the Wehrmacht. Yeah, getting history right is harder than it looks, which brings us to this video's sponsor, Heroes of History, and it fits the topic well because instead of watching history, you're the one shaping it. That's basically what this 4X strategy game is all about, expanding, building, and managing how everything develops over time. I tried it myself, the tutorial is clear with Albert Einstein himself guiding you through it. I really enjoyed building my city and collecting historical figures like Otto von Bismarck. The battles are easy to get into, just don't forget to bring a healer and to actually use their ability, or this might happen, which surprisingly didn't always stop me from winning. It's easy to get into, but still has enough depth without feeling overwhelming. There is no better time to try it out as a limited Ancient Egypt event is currently on, where you can face Anubis and get exclusive heroes. Plus, using my link or QR code will get you the Anubis Awakening starter pack with some extra useful resources. With thanks to Heroes of History, we shall now return to the inaccuracies. The Soviet infantry are portrayed attacking in the ridiculous human wave fashion stereotypical to Hollywood movies. They are seen bunched together, standing upright in the complete open, running straight into German gunfire and swarming into the enemy trenches to engage in extremely close quarter melee combat with their rifles. This is just not how soldiers in World War II were trained to fight. They should be advancing while apart from each other, crawling from one cover to another, providing covering fire, setting up machine guns, throwing grenades, etc. We begin seeing more gear on the Red Army soldiers here, though instead of being appropriate Soviet equipment, they appear to consist of more out-of-place Yugoslav bags and tent halves. The Germans fight more realistically, though there is an awful lot of firing their weapons from the hip without aiming or using the buttstock. This is alright in very close quarters, but it happens everywhere, even at longer ranges. It is quite a movie trope and would not be done by trained soldiers. The fire rate of the PPSH-41 is much too low. This is what it should sound like. Post-war Yugoslav Zastava M53s are seen as stand-ins for the German MG42. The M53 has a fire rate at less than the MG42, and this is prevalently heard in the film. This also leads to soldiers being seen firing them continuously instead of burst firing to prevent excess overheating and barrel changes, as would be vital to do with an MG42. The aforementioned Soviet 82 BM41 is seen as the only motor used by the Germans in the movie. A few of these appearing here and there as captured weaponry would make sense, but overall we should be seeing more German motors like the 8cm Granatwerfer 34. In addition to them being set up very close to each other again, the motors are seen on the front line hitting the attacking Soviets way too close to their positions. The 82 BM41 had a minimum range of 85 to 100 meters. It was for this reason that motors will be placed further behind the front line. After being injured in the battle, Steiner is sent to a hospital where a general presents a selection of food and drink. Among them are white wine bottles of the Jakob Gerhard Nierstein Herrgottsdorfkin line. This label only dates as far back as the 1960s.
Corporal! Hold this truck!
What the hell are you talking about?
That's an order, goddammit!
This soldier is wearing the rank insignia of a Feldwebel, which as aforementioned would be equivalent to a staff sergeant in this movie's British terminology. As a Feldwebel himself, Steiner would not have the authority to order him around like this. When Steiner returns to the front, we see him walking by an American Ford M8 Greyhound armored car. A German heavy armored reconnaissance vehicle like the SDKSZ 232 would have been more suitable. When Stransky asks Steiner to sign his Iron Cross commendation, he hands him a modern ballpoint pen. During World War II, the Wehrmacht generally used fountain or stylographic pens. The German position is shown getting bombarded by very out-of-place American F-4U Corsair fighter aircraft with US markings on them and all. Soviet ground attack aircraft like the Ilyushin IL-2 would be more suitable.
We're pulling back to the bridgehead at Kuban.
My man, you were at the Kuban bridgehead and have been for several months. The Kuban bridgehead referred to the entire German defensive position and the Taman Peninsula. In reality, the German 17th Army forces retreated to Crimea by crossing the Kerch Strait from Port Kavkaz and other surrounding areas. During the retreat, Steiner's unit is left behind and faces the attacking Soviet force. They are equipped with T-34-85 tanks, the first versions of which did not enter service until 1944, with the specific models in the movie actually being from the 1960s. The earlier 76mm variants, especially the M1943, would be era correct. A German Pak-40 anti-tank gun engages the armor. A close-up shot of the breach shows the gun ejecting casings with unstruck primers. To increase cinematics, the pyrotechnics made it so that the tanks that get destroyed utterly erupt into big fireballs. Only an ammunition explosion could cause such a large blast as this, and those were not all that common. A T-34 is seen smashing through Czech hedgehog and dragon teeth obstacles like they're made of styrofoam. These were specifically designed so tanks could not drive through them. The German troops flee into the abandoned factory and a T-34 pursues them by ramming through a brick wall and then, unsurprisingly, getting stuck in the rubble inside. Why on earth would a tank crew do this? It would be far more logical to send in infantry to clear this building. Even if the tank was to ram a wall down, standard procedure wouldn't see them do so while the gun is facing forward, but rather turn the turret backwards to prevent the barrel getting damaged. Now trapped behind enemy lines, the Germans hide from a Red Army convoy rather cartoonishly close to the road. The vehicles that pass consist of American GMC CCKWs. Some 6,700 deuce-and-a-half trucks were sent to the Soviet Union via Lend-Lease, though they were almost exclusively of the short wheelbase 352 type, rather than the long wheelbase 353 version we see in the movie. A Fiat Campagnola AR-51 is also seen in the convoy, an Italian vehicle from 1951. Lend-Leased Willys MB Jeeps could have been a more appropriate replacement. In this scene, the Soviet soldiers do not speak Russian, but rather sing in Serbo-Croatian. These are the lyrics and melody of Oj Kozaro, a Yugoslav partisan song that Red Army soldiers would not know of. Oberst Brandt is seen commanding his forces with a badly recreated map of the Taman Peninsula. It is simplified, with many of the areas being misshapen and misplaced. Most of the location labels are also horribly misspelt. The German squad attacks a cabin inhabited by Soviet women. As good as it is that this film shows female minorities in the Red Army, it is another piece of World War II media that completely neglects the more prevalent millions of Asian ethnics who fought for the USSR.
Major?
This Soviet officer is wearing rather poorly recreated shoulder boards of a junior lieutenant, not a major. It is strange that she even has shoulder boards, considering almost none of the other Soviets have them. If they are going to include these shoulder boards, then they should have at least tried to be consistent with them. To sneak back towards friendly territory, the German characters steal uniforms from the Red Army women that fit them questionably well enough, all things considered. We see that Obergefreiter Schnubart has gained some strange-looking winter hat that is likely a poor stand-in for a Soviet Ushanka. In an effort to recreate a Soviet Pilotka, another has what looks like a wonkily worn Yugoslavian Tinovka cap with a badly reproduced hammer and sickle badge slapped on. The last moments of the movie take place where the German regimental command moved to, what is supposed to be some unspecified railway settlement at the Taman Peninsula. It does not resemble anywhere in the region, as it is actually just Villa Casare in Savudrija, Croatia. The Soviets use a PTRS-41 anti-tank rifle that fails to recoil or have its breech pull back and eject a casing upon firing. The PTRS-41 round is shown blowing a couple of Germans up into the air. The 14.5 by 114mm cartridge this fires is certainly powerful, but would not make such a sizable explosion like this. The area gets strafed by a Soko 522, a two-seater Yugoslav military training and light attack aircraft produced in the 1950s. An alternative Soviet dive bomber like the Petlikov PE-2 would have made more sense to appear. It is in this final sequence that our characters perform the most insane court-martial offenses. As Steiner and his men reach the German command's position, they radio ahead to tell them they are inbound.
And we're coming in at dawn. Reconnaissance patrol with several Russian prisoners and no shooting.
This message is successfully received by Hauptmann Stransky and Lieutenant Trepig.
Special password. Demarcation. Signed Steiner.
Stransky, after already purposefully abandoning them at the factory position, discreetly orders Trepig to summary execute the group.
Could anyone blame you if you opened fire? home? Will you check the situation for me? And, take care of it.
Tripig and his men, for some reason, accept this. They watch as their friendlies approach with their hands up and yelling a code word and that they are with Steiner.
Demarcation! Steiner's coming in!
Before opening fire, eliminating a number of them.
We're German soldiers! Fire!
In revenge, Steiner outright kills Tripig in front of his men. This somehow does not lead to his immediate arrest or execution, with him instead being allowed to reach Stransky, where they both hold each other at firing point before ultimately deciding to go down fighting together. The movie then ends with Stransky crying out that he shockingly does not know how to reload his MP40, which Steiner just laughs at.
I have to reload! How do I reload? Dr. Steiner!
I get that these characters are fictional and that these are supposed to be the last dramatic moments happening in the lead up and start of a battle, but it is still very far-fetched. There are no accounts of anything like this happening during the retreat from the Kaman bridgehead. This movie is actually seen as quite controversial by some historians, due to its insistence on portraying the German 17th Army forces committing war crimes against their own friendly forces, rather than against the Soviet military and civilian population that they were much more atrocious towards in reality. And so, due to its linear, vague, and decently authentic depictions for its time, Cross of Iron is left with a total of just 65 historical inaccuracies. Massive thanks to fellow researchers K-Nyne, Hempy, Davidson, Michael Akkerman and Karabiny for their aid in making this video possible. Of course, thank you for watching. This has been the Frosty One, out.